Although, because he was a spy and closed-mouthed about his life in general, all the stuff I read says we really don't know how much of what Mo said or did was true, and how much of it was not, and how much of it we never will get to hear, because he was a very personal guy. And interestingly, I didn't know about Mo Berg until my friend Ben Bova, who died from COVID, sadly, about a few months ago. Famous author Ben Bova, one of the big names in science fiction, and was a baseball. And then one time we were sitting around having lunch together, I think, just talking baseball, and he started talking about Mo Berg. And bear in mind, I grew up in baseball. I'm supposed to know all this stuff, and I had never heard of Mo Berg. Somehow that whole thing had slipped by. And once I started selling these stories, I actually went to Ben and asked his permission to use all the stuff he told me about Mo Berg and use it in these stories. He was very gracious about that, and he wasn't. Of course, he'd sold 150 novels, and I'd sold 5. So he had plenty of room to be gracious. So, but he was a very gracious guy anyway.
Oh, I'm sure you're equally gracious to some of your students. Have you been mentoring anybody that's really coming up?
I've had in my current teaching role, I have 2 or 3 one who has sold, and 2 or 3 that I think are going to be good established authors. And then from my previous days teaching undergraduates, I had 2 or 3 young women writers that I had as undergraduates who all became established authors. One of them just contacted me last week, Samantha Clark. You can look up her name. And
we will.
And Samantha is writing for major publishers, writing middle grade novels for some major publishers. And she just wanted to send me a note to say thank you because I had encouraged her when she was an undergrad. So
nice. Oh, nice.
Yeah, and then that's why teachers teach, is so that it's somewhere down the line. You hear from.
Do you have any blurbs? Has anybody asked you for a back panel blurb?
Sure. That's part of the thing. Yeah, I've done several of those.
Good.
Happily, I've never been given a book to blurb that I didn't like. So I've never faced that ethical problem that writers often face. I don't know what you do if you'd like to say something nice and it's a friend and they're an author and they're a good author, but you happen to not like this book. So
well, that's where your skill as an author comes in.
That's
it.
To
write something which sounds complimentary, but really is perhaps ironic.
We are, after all, fiction writers, right? So you just write a little bit of fiction.
I've done a blurb. Friends, Libby Ware and Charlene Ball from Atlanta, and their publisher wanted a blurb from a bookseller because the main characters were booksellers, and so they wanted a blurb from a bookseller, and so I got to do that. That was interesting.
Yeah,
but it's a lot of fun to have that book and look on the back, and there I am.
There's a it's really fun. It's also kind of intimidating. You want to do a good job on it, and so you sort of labor over it. There's a very famous science fiction and fantasy author named Julie Cherneda, who's a friend of mine. She's a Canadian author. And she asked me, she had a trilogy that had come out a few years before, and they were doing an omnibus of it. They were doing all 3 books in one big book. And she asked me if I would write the introduction for this omnibus. And the problem was I hadn't read any of them. So that means to write a 1,000 word or 1,500 word introduction for her, I had to read all 3 of those novels. Happily, they were great fun to read. So that worked out. But every now and then you get caught in these moments saying yes to people, and you realize after the fact, oops, this means I got to do a lot of work. Worth doing though. Worth doing.
Yeah. Rick, have to ask, so we don't make it too public. Everybody there will be an alien evening, right?
I am going to ask during our interview. I do not have a name for the third book yet. And so when I do Q&As on websites and stuff, I've been saying, give me some ideas. Alien dinner. I don't know. Alien night.
Alien sunset.
Alien afternoon. There's all sorts of possibilities. So I'm open to suggestions. I don't have a name for it yet. Right now, I'm calling it the third book.
All right. Well, it's good to know that there is a third book.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
All right. You hear that out there, everybody? Welcome. Good morning. There's going to be a third book. Here we are. Welcome to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers' rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. We are the only live stream program on the internet devoted entirely to rare and collectible books and the people who love them, and that's YOUU. We're here every Saturday, 12:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Pacific. That's me out here on the left coast. I think Rick and Lee, you guys are on the right coast. 5:30 in that long, skinny line that runs down the middle of Greenwich, England, 5:30 p.m. We're live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, and any day during the week, you could come on back and listen to us on your favorite podcast, Spotify, Google, wherever great podcasts are given away for free. With me this week, science fiction writer Rick Wilber. Rick Wilber, hello.
Hello.
And our weekly guest host, Leland from Calhoun, Georgia. Lee?
Hi.
Lee, we're going to get back to your book club at the end of the show. Is that right?
That's right. We're doing snake handling today.
Ooh.
Oh, boy.
With a demonstration, I hope.
How do I compete with that?
Yeah, my goodness. Well, I know. I'm a little concerned. I told Alan I was a little concerned. I've done weird outsider artists, and now I'm doing snake handling. What are people thinking about what goes on up here in Northwest Georgia?
And Rick, I'm not exactly sure what you and I and Lee are going to talk about, so I'm just going to leave that wide open because from the short time I've known you, it can go anywhere.
It might. I'm ready. Let's go anywhere.
All right, but before we do, let me invite everybody who's listening in right now. Tell me where you're from, and you got any questions, put them up there on the chat box over on the other side of the right side of your screen. And if you're having fun, share us with your friends. Tell them where you could find us. This first segment of the show is live, and then we're going to move into a couple of pre-recorded sessions. We're going to have David Hess from the ever-popular Things Found in Books, David from the Bookman Bookstore in Orange, California, and our co-producer, associate producer, Lynn Thompson, with another episode of The Story Behind the Story. Then we're going to finish up with another live section. Richard Mori is going to tell us how the first book fair in America to go live after the pandemic went last weekend up in New Hampshire. But Great. First, Rick, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Everybody, Rick Wilber. He's a writer, professor, journalist. His new novel, Alien Day, is the sequel to his 2016 novel, Alien Morning. And I think we confirmed a minute ago there will be a third book called The Third Book, TBD. Rick, I understand you've been on the show before. Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back. I like this show a lot.
Rick, I just introduced you as a writer, professor, journalist, novelist, humanitarian. What was your great love? What got you started putting pen to paper?
I was a heavy reader as a child, and starting really in first and second grade, and then I just read voraciously. And I read all of the stuff all through elementary school, all the things that the kids in those days read. I read the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and the Bobbsey Twins. I had sisters, so I read all those books as well. And some of the books I read were science fiction, juvenile science fiction novels by people like Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov.
I grok you, believe me, I grok you.
Yeah, good man. And I grokked the grass. And in fact, I grokked the grass so much that I did my master's thesis years later on Robert Heinlein.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's
we
strange.
do not want to uncover that master's thesis. We'd like it to stay hidden.
Well, I'll bet you the original manuscript's worth a few dollars.
I doubt it. So by the time I was in high school, I was very much a high school jock, coming from a sports family. I was a quarterback of the football team and played baseball and ran track, and but I still loved reading. By that time, I loved reading science fiction, and at some point, I decided that I wanted to write stuff instead of just reading stuff, and I initially gravitated to sports writing because that came so naturally to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking before the show about the Red Sox and the Cardinals World Series and
Right,
Bob
right.
Gibson.
Sure.
I started writing sports writing while I was in college. Classic stringer. You know, a stringer was some college kid you hire to cover high school basketball games. That kid was me. For the Metro East Journal, East St. Louis, Illinois newspaper.
Did you get paid?
Yes, I got paid. I think I recall it was $25 a game, which to me was not bad. And you know, I would go see the Redbud, Illinois Musketeers versus the Freeburg Midgets, these small town Southern Illinois games, and it was great fun. And then I got my big break when I had a chance to interview Bob Gibson for a story in Sport Magazine. Do you remember Sport Magazine?
Way.
It was a time when Sport Magazine was the #1 competitor to Sports Illustrated. And I had a story in there. So I was thinking that was wonderful. But then by my late 20s, I hadn't written any science fiction, which I had promised myself I was going to do. And 30 just seemed to me like I was going to be ancient and over the hill. My feelings on that have changed right now, but at the time, I thought 30 was really a big deal. So
the top of the hill is still a little bit up way from all of us.
Yeah, let's hope. So I went to a famous writers conference. I applied and got into the Clarion Writers Conference, purely devoted to science fiction and fantasy, weeks long. And I prospered there. I felt pretty good. And within a year after that, I was starting to sell short stories to science fiction magazines. And over time, I backed away from sports writing entirely and went with fiction and science fiction pretty much entirely.
Rick, you mentioned before you went to a fiction fantasy writing experience. What's it? We got fiction, fantasy, horror. What are all these genres? How do you mesh them up? What's the Venn diagram for?
Well, that's a wonderful question to ask because I'm now in a visiting assistant professor in a genre fiction MFA program where you get your master's in creative writing, genre fiction. Genre fiction is all of those things that are sort of craft oriented and meant to be to help you write, to make money, to reach an audience. A little less on the art side and more on the craft side, because you can teach craft. And so genre is science fiction, horror, fantasy, westerns, romance, spy novels, mystery novels, cozy mystery novels, all the subgenres, hard science fiction, soft science fiction, all of those are under the general rubric of genre fiction.
Where is this that you're teaching?
Western Colorado University.
It's a little ways from St. Petersburg.
Well, it's a long distance program. It's an online program except for 2 weeks every summer where everybody from all over Earth, some of these students come to Gunnison, Colorado, and we all meet and have classes all day long and socialize all night long. And it's a chance for all the grad students to meet all the faculty.
Will it be happening this year? Will you be getting together live?
It didn't happen last summer. We had to do it all online. It's happening this year as a hybrid. I'm not able to go, but a lot of people are going. Maybe half the students will be live, the ones that sort of live closer to Colorado, and the other half are streaming in to class lectures and workshops, and it's a terrific program. I'm really, really happy. They're really proud to be part of it.
Rick,
how long is the program?
The program is a couple of years, and it's but there are variations. You can take a third year. It's genre fiction, and it's also screenwriting is another one, and poetry is another one. Nature writing is another one, and publishing, teaching you how to work in the publishing business, is another one. And so the program is set up so that you can have your master's, and in genre fiction, your master's thesis is a novel that you can then work to market. So what a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
And then
that's what colleges should be.
Yeah, that's what we think. And so if you want, you can tack on one more year and get another specialty. So you could also do publishing, for instance, or if you're getting it in publishing, you could also do genre fiction or poetry or whatever is that, or screenwriting. A lot of people like to mix screenwriting with genre fiction. It's a terrific program. I would advise everyone to just Google it and take a look at the program.
How's the talent? Do you have any up-and-comers going through your class?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, these are mostly adults, not all of them, but mostly adults coming back to do something they love, and get an MFA while they're at it and learn how to do this craft. And so the motivation is there and the talent is there. So it's a very impressive group of students always.
Rick, get back on the subject of science fiction. Some people might say that science fiction started way back in the days of Greek mythology. But with respect, and I don't know, maybe even the Iliad and the Odyssey, but where do you peg science fiction, and how would you specifically define that genre?
So you have to have a scientific age before you can have science fiction, okay, which means that the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid and all of the various sagas and myths, those are all would be under the label of fantasy today.
Okay.
But science fiction, which is where you're using some science as you know it to be part of the story, is generally, modern science fiction generally is said to start with Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. And that's a really good place to start. They're trying to reanimate, and there's the science of the day being put to use, and the science both goes right and goes wrong in that wonderful novel.
That's right. I mean, there was medical science, there was a physical science, electricity was coming into its own.
Yeah. So it was, it was the foundation, I think, of modern science fiction begins with Mary Shelley. That's what I think. And from there, you move forward. You and I chatted about this once. You move forward to H.G. Wells and Jules Verne. This is my chance from our previous conversation. Jules Verne was the one who paid more attention to the science and the engineering than Wells. Wells was more concerned with sort of the storytelling impact of aliens arriving, for instance, in War of the Worlds. And then into the 1920s and the 1930s, you get pulp fiction, which is not only in mysteries, but the science fiction pulp adventures. And think Buck Rogers, think Flash Gordon, and you get where that is. And then some of the very modern science fiction starts during the 1940s with some famous writers who were just a bunch of kids who liked to hang out together, and that's people like Asimov and Heinlein, and they started putting conventions together, and that group called First Fandom these days. We recognize many of those people each year at the World Convention. And, they sort of put together the modern idea of science fiction.
Excellent. This one may sound a little bit different for you, but have you ever written about a technology, a science technology that has actually come to fruition? Maybe one of your early stories. Here we are, 30 years later, and now it's actually being developed out in Silicon Valley or anywhere.
Yes, yes, happily. I'm often wrong, as science fiction writers often are, but I think I'm right. In an Alien Day, I was a journalism professor for many years and a mass media futurist. I taught mass media undergraduate classes of 400 students in introduction to mass communications. And so my interest in the future of mass media, in fact, you can go find a book I edited. It's a collection of fiction and nonfiction about the future of that, called Future Media, by Tachyon Publications. And I put that together in these Sudani stories, including in Alien Day, where I have a thing called sweep technology, where you either intracranially or with tabs on the skin or by various means, you capture all the senses of the person sending the message. You get that person's taste and touch, sight, sound,
emotions.
Well, you can do that. You can sort of get the emotional side, but your brain, if the emotions are hitting that person, when you feel all that, the same emotions will come through for you. And that's what I've been using for my future journalism. And I call it a sweep system because it sweeps up all of the senses. And
have you heard of some university or corporation working on this?
No, but I claim it. So right now, if you're working on that, come talk to me. So
file the patent.
I wish I could. I wish I had some sort of ability to do that. I wish there was something patentable instead of just an idea. But
it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. I recently did a story for a publication put out by the Society of American Baseball Research, and it was about future media for fans of baseball. And of course, a sweep system, you could be inside the head and feel like you are in the body of the pitcher. Or the hitter, and you're watching a 95-mile-an-hour fastball go by, and you're swinging and hitting it, and you can feel the contact in the bat when the meat of the bat hits that ball and off it goes. So it strikes me as something that I think we have just about all of that technology is here now. Somebody just needs to put it together. Already we have all these live microphones in the dugouts, and we mic up the players. Even when they're on the field, you get to hear what they're saying to each other. So I think we're only one or two steps away from that. And what a thing that would be for a fan to put on maybe a virtual reality headset and put on some gloves that give you the touch of that person, and be the center fielder as you're chasing down a fly ball, crashing into the wall, making a great catch.
Think about the medical uses. A doctor could put this on and see how the patient is actually feeling.
Yep. As is typical of me from a sports family. I make all these sports associations, but yeah, it would be it'd be usable in all sorts of and fun and interesting. Wouldn't you like to be whoever is your favorite performer in music? Wouldn't it be great to feel like you are inside that person up on stage with a huge audience in front and you're singing to them? You feel just like you're them.
Or you started dancing with them. I'd be dancing with Jennifer Lopez. In 5 minutes, I'd be tuckered out and laying on the floor.
Yeah. So
wouldn't it have to be? I know in your books, a lot of the equipment associated with the sweeping seems kind of cumbersome.
It is.
And it wouldn't have to be really almost like when Peter got the implants,
right.
For that for
Right.
it to be comfortable for someone to use.
Right. Well, the first thing to do is make it easy to use for the person who's sending it out, to make it so they can learn. In fact, they would quickly sort of not even realize that they're wearing the whatever it is, or have it implanted, whatever it is. But the system is, as I have it now, still is pretty. You have to put on a helmet and sort of snap things into place. But and I was thinking of virtual reality goggles. So just taking the next step with those. But if studying this as I did for this article I wrote, we are not very far away from having contact lenses that will do all the thing the smart glasses do now. So you could have a contact lens that senses everything, and you could wear a pair of glasses, or Lord knows, your own contact lens, and get that full effect. So
I believe we'll be reading our texts with our eyeballs before long.
Yeah, I think so. I think that technology already exists. They're very, very far ahead with contact lenses. In the smart glasses, they call them. I've always been intrigued by that idea. I was so intrigued that I signed up. You might remember Google Glass from 2012, 2013. I signed up. You had to sign up and beg Google to be an early adopter of that, to be a glass pioneer. And you had to fill out a form and beg them to let you spend $2,000 on Google Glass. And they liked me because I was going to show it to students. So they said, sure, you can be one of these people. So I spent $2,000, and it was Google Glass was a first generation, kind of clumsy, imperfect, but that was 2013 when I was wearing it. So think about what technology has come since then and improved.
Rick, what do you think of the holographic technology, the Princess Leia stuff? When will our cell phones be able to shoot out a hologram of the person we're talking to?
Well, they can do that now. They just can't get it shrunk down enough to be. I mean, if you go to Disneyland or Disney World, you can see those things, but the equipment is still bulky. But remember what your computer looked like in 1995. Sure. And
Lee, you were in Disneyland about a month ago. Did you see it?
Well, I'm not really sure what all we saw, because we did a bunch of stuff in the Star Wars section in Hollywood Studios that was just incredible stuff.
Yeah.
I would go back if I could be teleported right to Rise of the Resistance, to do that. I don't want to stand in line again. But a lot of things, and like the photographs that you can sign up for the photo package, and you get your picture made, and suddenly Tinkerbell is in your hand, or Baby Yoda is sitting there beside you, and things like that. The things they do at Disney World, I hadn't been since the late 80s, and things are really different, really different in terms of technology. I don't like roller coasters, but I can do stuff like
sit in a room. Yeah.
I can do the virtual reality stuff.
Right.
I can do that. I can't do roller coasters.
Isn't it amazing with that virtual reality stuff? You're sitting in a room, and there's not a whole lot of body motion going on. Your chair tilts a little bit down, but your mind fills it in.
Yeah.
And you would swear that you're going over a cliff.
Right. Yes.
Or whatever it is. Yeah. Yes. It's amazing.
I loved it. Just loved it. Now, my 6-year-old grandson likes real roller coasters. He prefers that, but not me.
I suspect I will never again be on a real roller coaster.
I did ride the Dwarfs Mine Train at Disney. because my granddaughter, who doesn't like things like that, was going to do it, and I couldn't be upstaged by an 8-year-old.
Well,
So I did it.
I admire you. So well done.
Rick, not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to attend one of your classes. I wondered if you'd share with any budding writers out there, any novices, some of your wisdom, some of your wits, other than, write every day and edit real hard. From a science fiction standpoint, what advice would you give to a young writer about expanding their science fiction creativity?
Well, other than urging them after they get their bachelor's to come to Western and get an MFA in genre fiction, I would say thing number one always is read heavily in those areas where you think you might want to be a writer.
Sure.
And read, not just read the classics, but read what people are writing today in that area. So that will give you an idea of where the field is at the moment, and might give you an idea on where you might find your place in the field. I would say a really good way to start is by writing short stories and getting a name for yourself as a short story writer, and sell those stories to the magazines. There are a lot of online magazines. There are still some classic print science fiction and fantasy magazines. Asimov's Science Fiction Magazine, where most of my stuff is published. Analog Magazine, a sister publication. Fantasy and Science Fiction Magazine. These are still in print and also online. And then there are a number of really good online magazines, all paying markets. They don't pay a lot, but they pay. And if you can begin to hone your craft by reading those magazines and beginning to write stories that sell to those magazines, you are on your way. That's a major step in the direction of writing novels, perhaps, that are the kinds of books that you feel you want to be one of those writers. I mean, that's all I ever did. And that all I ever wanted to be was one of those science fiction writers.
Sure. And of course, when you compete against your peers and your story is chosen to be in that magazine, it is a stamp of approval to get you on your way.
Absolutely. It's a major stamp of approval. And then, maybe you make the long list for some awards, and there's a whole process you go through that begins with reading. It all begins with reading.
Great advice. Great advice.
I have a son that I'm going to try to send to your program.
Okay, great.
He has done some online stuff. His writing tends to be, I think, more fantasy than science fiction.
Right.
But this could be. He works in television now. He works for a television production company in Montana, and he does write for them, mostly script outlines and show proposals and stuff like that. But I think he just doesn't quite know where to go now. What to do now.
Yeah, you send him to the Western Colorado University website.
I'm going to suggest that to him
for an MFA in creative writing.
So if Gardner Lynn comes your way, you take care of him.
Will do. Absolutely. That's great.
All right, Rick, thank you so much for being with us. Your new novel, Alien Day. Who's the publisher on that?
The publisher is Tor Books, the largest publisher of science fiction in the country. There's the book. Getting good reviews so far. We'll hope that holds up under the stress of more reviewers. But
and that's the second novel and the sequel from your 2016 Alien Morning. And right. I understand that you're taking suggestions for book number 3.
Yeah, I got it. I'm in the middle of writing book number 3 right now, and I don't have a name for it. So if anybody has a good idea, it'd be nice to avoid Alien. Yes. Text me. Go to my website. Go to my website and where you can contact me and send me a note and say you have a great name. The natural one, I guess, is Alien Night. But if we can come up with something better than that, I would love something better than that.
I like Sunset. I still like Alien Sunset.
Alien Sunset.
I think you need to avoid a title that sounds like it's the end if you're planning to do more than 3.
I'm just planning to do 3, but if somebody says, "Will you write a 4th one?" So,
And then you would do it.
and then it's all about the money.
All right.
Hard.
Thank you, Rick. I hope you'll come back when that one's ready as well. It's always, I've had so much fun. You're a great guest.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Ed. Thanks so much. And Lee, thanks.
I've enjoyed it a lot. I'm enjoying the books.
It's been great talking to you.
All right, Lee, we're going to see you at the end of the show. Okay. All right, folks, I got a little story to tell you. Back in 1967, Paul McCartney and John Lennon wrote a little song with a little help from my friends. It was on the Sgt. Pepper album. And then the next year, that old guy, Joe Cocker, topped the British charts with his version of it. And for you people that are a little bit younger, you might remember Cocker's version was a theme song for the TV series The Wonder Years. Oh, that was great. Even I watched that show. Well, we all need a little help from our friends. So first, let me say, if you've got a friend in your life today, tell them thanks. We could all use a friend, and we could all use a little bit of thanks. And our weekly presenter, David Hess, has a new friend, and he's sending a little bit of thanks out to, I think it's Nova Scotia, Canada, or New Brunswick, Canada, way over there on the right side of the country. Well, another country, actually. So here we go. Here's David Hess this week with Things Found in Books, along with his friend from Eastern Canada.
Hello, this is David Hess from the Bookman in Orange, California. Wishing you a hearty hello today, and I'm excited about our Things I Found in Books for the Things I Found in Books for this segment, and I'm ready to get started. And plus, I have a letter from a fan of the show. So let's get started today with this book called The Officer's Guide, published in 1943 during the war years. In it was the program for the graduation exercise of the 7th class of the Officer Cadet School in Fargo, North Dakota, May 26, 1943. So in Fargo, they had a graduation of officers during the war years. And there's the program of the day's event, or who will be talking, and starting at 9:30 a.m. sharp. Be there. And when you open up the thing, it gives you a list of the graduates. Now, in the book itself, signing up top there is a Lieutenant Nelson N. Bennett. Fargo, North Dakota, May 26, 1943. He wrote his name in there, and Mr. Bennett did graduate. He's right there. He's right there. So this is his book. In all actuality or likelihood, this is his program. And he put it in this book here, put it on his shelf, and it ended up in Orange, California. 50, 60, 70 years later. I didn't do the math. Now, on to our next thing. This is a little interesting. Now, this is Das Kapital by Karl Marx. It's a modern library edition. And inside, also, again, the gentleman put his name in there, A.C. Wolinski, 7265. And what I have in Mr. Wolinski's book, a gas receipt, credit card receipt. And, the reason I even bring this up is it's pretty mundane, really, but it's fascinating as well. It was also rang through in 1965, this credit card. And he got gas, and he got 16 gallons of gas at the Texaco station. And he paid $6.11 for 16 gallons of gas. 36 cents per gallon is what he paid back in 1965. So he got the slip, went and put it in his Karl Marx Das Kapital book, and there it sat until it reached Orange, California in 2021. Oh, and then this was brought to me by a gentleman who is a friend of the store. He is an internet seller and a book scout. His name is Wade, and he found this giant tome, a system of genitourinary diseases and psephology and dermatology. So this was published in 1893, full of illustrations. But in this book, you have just kind of the book plates up here, which are fascinating by themselves. And it's from the Georges Medical Library. And it shows where it's supposed to be filed, what room and everything like that. It's all up in here. There's a reference edition. It's a reference copy. But inside was this. And what it is, and I did a little research on this one. I'm not very good on the research. I don't know why. I just like finding this stuff. I'm not much of a worker bee when it comes to doing research. But this is a poster for the 4th Liberty Loan subscribers to hang in their windows to show their support. It includes the honor emblem, a flag with 4 stripes representing the 4th Liberty Loan. Liberty loans were war bonds that were sold to the United States citizens to support the Allied cause in World War I. And this particular thing was from 1917. So World War I, bought some Liberty loans, helped support the war, and you would put this in your window to show your neighbors that you found it, or that you have supporting the war. And that was fascinating. Thank you, Wade. And I want to take a moment. I want to go back to the Officer's Guide book. As I was talking about Wade here, I remember that the Officer Guide was brought to me by a customer of mine who enjoys the show. And he had seen the show many times and things found in books. And he's the one that brought me the Officer's Guide with the program in it. And his name is Steve. And I want to thank Steve, my customer, for bringing that, and I was glad to show it on the show. And lastly, I found this in a book, and I sadly must admit that I did not keep the book I found it in because it got lost in the shuffle. So forgive me, I can't produce the book that it was found in, but I found it just recently, just the other day, and I wanted to share it with my audience here. It's a little card. And it says, what is the baseball score? So when I first pulled this out, I love a little challenge there. And it took me a while. It took me a little bit of time. But, and there's nothing on the back, by the way. It's complete. It's just a blank card on the back. And it says, what is the baseball score? And so it's a challenge, a little riddle. And I finally pieced together what it says. What I believe it says. Now it's tree to tree, or 3 to 3, tree to tree, bottom of the 5th, 1 out, and nobody on. Pretty goofy. Now, as far as I can tell, the card is from probably the late 40s or in the 50s somewhere. It has that kind of art style. But again, I said there's no date on it. And the fact that they use the word 5th for liquor, which is a 5th of whiskey, I mean, you don't really hear that anymore. I mean, that's kind of an old-timey statement. But anyway, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And I had a good laugh over that one. And it was a challenge to figure it out. And I think I got it. I don't really like the tree-to-tree thing, but as far as I can tell, that's what it was. Now, lastly, I got a letter from a customer from a watcher of our show. Excuse me, I have to read it. It's off my iPad, and it's causing a lot of reflection in my glasses. I would take my glasses off, but then I wouldn't be able to read it. I'm blind. David, I'm a young, spirited 62-year-old. I've been watching your YouTube videos and find them most interesting. I like what you find in books. I often write letters in books I've read. The books are not collectible or valuable, and I give my email address and date, etc. Occasionally, someone finds one of these books and emails me. Sometimes I mention where I left the book and sometimes put a penny in for good luck or something. I imagine someday, years from now, someone might email me out of the blue and say, "Hey, Barry, found your book dated blank," which is 20 years ago. I plan to keep the same email address for the rest of my life so that the email address will link to the future finders or readers of the books. I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, a long, long way from you in Orange, California. Keep up the great broadcast, David. Barry Wood, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Thank you, Barry. I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to email me. I loved hearing from you. It actually made my day. And let's hope that somebody finds your book and emails you a hearty hello and continues the trend. Well, that's all I have for today. I want to thank you for joining me. And if you have something you would like to share, something you found in a book, send me a letter or an email at oldbook@ebookman.com. oldbook@ebookman.com. And send a picture too that we can share with the audience. And I want to thank you very much for stopping by. This is David in Orange, California, saying thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Readers, I walk around the neighborhood and I see these little boxes with a glass door in the front for lending libraries. And you get on the train and you find that someone left the book behind for somebody else to read. And nonetheless, they stuck a penny in it for good luck. I'll tell you what, you book readers out there, you're absolutely the best. When you're done with your next book, give it away to a stranger. Wouldn't that be a fun thing to do? Anyways, this month is LGBT Pride Month, and our regular contributor, Lynn Thompson, has been considering the work and lives of some forgotten gay writers. This week, he has explored the story behind two late 19th and early 20th century British writers. They are novelist Ronald Furbank and short story writer Hector Hugh Munro, who also wrote under the pseudonym Saki. After we're done with Lynn's segment, we're going to have Richard Mori back with us to talk to us about how his in-person live and living color book fair went last week in New Hampshire. All right, Lynn, the stage is all yours.
Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Lynn Thompson from Chester, South Carolina, taking a look at two more LGBT authors for Pride Month in June. Today I want to talk a little bit about Ronald Furbank and Hector Hugh Munro. Furbank, it seems, was born blushing, one critic wrote. His associates never failed to mention his social awkwardness, particularly the incessant fluttering of hands or compulsive washing of the same, and the hysterical laughter which would periodically erupt, leaving him incapable of completing an anecdote. Attempting to embolden himself a drink merely exacerbated the problem. While at Cambridge, Oscar Wilde's son Vivian recalls seeing Furbank incongruously dressed in what he called the costume of sport. Confounded, Holland inquired what he had been doing, and learning that he had apparently been playing football, further inquired whether it was rugby or soccer. "Oh," replied Furbank, "I don't remember." His delicate health led him to leave Cambridge without a degree in 1909 and seek out more sympathetic climates. His friends often knew of his comings and goings only from notices in the Times newspaper. He telegraphed one friend, "Tomorrow I go to Haiti. They say the president is a perfect dear." He presented a marchesa with an armload of lilies on another occasion and suggested they embark at once for America. Burbank published his first short story in 1905, and in the last decade of his brief life produced 8 short novels. Like Proust and Coward, Saki, and Wilde, he was a sharp observer of the rituals of his circle as well as its hostility to outsiders. But the barbs in his writing are sometimes so subtle that they only become visible on a second reading. While his plots and dialogue can occasionally seem as precious and overstuffed as the Victorian salon, Burbank was also remarkably forward-looking, such as in the impressionistic passages in Volmus, which record fragments of conversation out of context, or his regular deployment of characters who were gay or lesbian or otherwise alienated. Malcolm Cowley once wrote, as one Burbank character famously observed, the world is disgracefully managed, and one hardly knows to whom to complain. Nuns and priests constantly flit in and out of Burbank's imagination, the air thick with incense and moral compromise. His tastes in Catholicism ran to the theatrical. His last book, concerning the eccentricities of Cardinal Pirelli from 1926, is an irreligious religious farce set in the cathedral of a Spanish prince of the church, whose enthusiasms include an unsuitable passion for choir boys and the baptism of pet dogs. Burbank was a minor talent, but to those with a taste for the minor keys, he was a master. E.M. Forster thought trying to analyze Burbank's genius was akin to breaking a butterfly upon the wheel. In her famous 1964 essay, Notes on Camp, Susan Sontag listed the Burbank novel as part of that aesthetics canon. Edmund Wilson, the great American critic, reckoned him one of the finest writers of his time. Evelyn Waugh in his day and Alan Hollinghurst in this found him praiseworthy. W.H. Auden said, a person who dislikes Ronald Burbank may, for all I know, possess some admirable quality, but I do not wish to ever see him again. Orbiting the Mediterranean, Spain, Italy, the Middle East, North Africa, for diversions and a cure for his many ailments, real and imagined, Burbank died alone, only 40, in a Rome hotel. His friend, Lord Berners, himself an Olympic pentathlete of eccentricities, arranged the funeral. Not knowing Burbank's brand, he buried him in the Protestant cemetery in Rome. In the interest of decorum, however, Burbank was later reinterred at the Campo Verano amidst prominent Jesuits and C.K.S. Moncrief, the translator of Proust. You can find any of Burbank's works in first editions now for under $100. And as I say, once you try his style out, much in the way that one acquires a taste for Gertrude Stein, he is a remarkable and rewarding author. As is Hector Hugh Monroe, born in 1870. He was a child of the Raj. His father, an inspector general in the Indian Imperial Police, was stationed in Rangoon. His mother was the daughter of an admiral. She died in 1872 after being charged by a cow. Hector and his brother and sister were shipped home to England, there to be raised by a shrewish grandmother and a Woodhouseian collection of aunts. He later took revenge on them by portraying tyrannical aunts in many of his stories about children. After school and some traveling with his newly retired father, Monroe joined the Burma police, but was back in Britain by 1895 after contracting malaria. He took to journalism in London, writing for magazines and daily papers. His only serious book published in his name, The Rise of the Russian Empire, was a history in the style of Gibbon. From 1902 to 1908, he was a foreign correspondent in the Balkans and various anarchist assassinations of the day. He serialized a parody of Alice in Wonderland called Westminster Alice, setting the intrepid girl in the House of Commons. The Unbearable Bassington came out in 1912, and 2 years later, a speculation on the German invasion of Britain appeared as When William Came. He joined the army when he did not have to at the age of 44 and declined an officer's commission. A German sniper killed him one night in 1916, shortly after he bade a soldier to put out a cigarette. He was 46 and his burial site is unknown. Monroe avoided the collateral damage of the Oscar Wilde scandal in 1895. Most of what little is known of his personal life is from snippets that survived the bonfire his sister made of his papers after his death, and a biographical sketch she published years later to try and cement him into straightness. A proper biography did not appear until 2007. What made and retains Monroe's fame was a cascade of short stories ranging from the satirical to the fantastic, published in his decade in London under the pen name Saki. His work had the same sort of wit as Oscar Wilde, but while Wilde delighted in paradox and a glittering veneer of frivolity, Saki's stories of the English upper classes were surgically acerbic, sometimes almost painfully so, written in a style studded with epigrams and with well-contrived plots, often turning on practical jokes involving mean ants or surprise endings. His stories reveal a vein of cruelty in their author and a self-deification of the enfant terrible version of childhood. A few of his many aphorisms include: Reginald closed his eyes with the elaborate weariness of one who has rather nice eyelashes and thinks it useless to conceal the fact. The cook was a good cook, and as cooks go, she went. The people of Crete, unfortunately, make more history than they can consume locally. On another occasion, he wrote, but good gracious, you've got to educate him first. You can't expect a boy to be vicious till he's been to a good school. Finally, I'm living so far beyond my means that we may almost be said to be living apart. Many Saki stories involve a young man about town called Clovis. Another series centered on an effete, world-weary character called Reginald, who falls somewhere between a wild character and the more loose inhabitants of Fairbanks fiction. His novel, The Unbearable Bassington, features an amiable, if off-kilter, layabout young man and his socialite mother, who wishes nothing more keenly than to marry him off to a girl with money. Almost no one in the book seems to have any redeeming qualities, rather like the characters in the early works of Evelyn Waugh 20 years later. Speaking about her son, who is being educated somewhere in the southern counties, to her brother Henry, Thomas Bassington's mother states, I'm very fond of him, but I bear the separation well. When he's here, it's rather like having a live volcano in the house, a volcano that in its quietest moments asks incessant questions and uses strong scent. Saki's work darkened over time, becoming more scathing in its indictments of society and more adventurous in the embrace of supernatural themes, often involving the alliance of animals and children against adults. Though his stories rest squarely in the long Edwardian summer, they have proved enduringly popular. He was an inspiration to a generation of writers, including A. A. Milne, P.G. Wodehouse, and Noel Coward, who wrote the preface to an early collection of his stories. And early on, he earned his place in the first ranks of short story writers in English. Because his work was produced over such a short time and his life was so short, Monroe is often cast, like Furbank, unjustly as a minor period writer. But happily, virtually all his works remain in print, easily available in anthologies and in the public domain. And his first editions as well, when you can find them, bring less than $100 on the open market. So that's two more famous, sometimes unjustly neglected gay and lesbian writers that we're taking a look at this month. I'll be back next week with two more.
Thank you, Lynn. Ronald Furbank is now on my list of people to be read and books to stack on my nightstand. Got a comment here. Let me see. David Waterville, this is a fantastic way to send books out in the world. You know, David, I was just thinking the same thing, especially putting a penny in a book. Remember that children ditty, find a penny, pick it up. If it's heads up, you'll have good luck, or something like that. Wouldn't it be so cool to find a book on the bus with a penny in it? All right, our next guest, who is Richard Mori with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We're trying to get the camera set up. Is that working?
Okay. There he is. Looking good, Hollywood.
Well, thank you. Let me put my headset on, though. That's what I really needed to do.
While you're doing that, let me remind everybody, Richard Mori for last week ran the first live book fair in North America. Richard in the Northern New England Book Fair up there in New Hampshire. I think he had about 50 tables. It was almost full. And I heard from a couple of ephemera dealers that it went pretty well. What was your perspective, Richard?
Well, we were happy. The crowd wasn't quite what I was hoping it might be, but we're in times where we can't predict. And but I know that the dealers for almost all the dealers on the floor were happy at the end of the weekend. And I think that's one of the forms of measurement.
Good. Anything special? Did you see on the show floor? People bringing in, finding lots of new material during the shutdown?
Well, I'll tell you, let me back up. There was two really distinctive comments that I heard over and over and over again. The first one was the number of people who thanked me and other dealers for being there, for having a show, for having something to go to. I was actually surprised at that. They went out of their way to be grateful for having a live event. The other takeaway was the number of persons who came up to me and couldn't believe the quality of merchandise, which really leads into your question. One of the things I realized, because I could recognize it in my own stock, I had things that I normally wouldn't have because I've been buying and I've had no place to sell it. So that was pretty much why I think we were getting comments about quality on the floor, is because people had been stocking up, and we had buyers that came back the second day. They didn't get enough the first.
You know, I've been thinking the same thing about the inventory that I've picked up over the last year. And yeah, I put it out there on these online fairs. But, you know, sometimes things don't really sell until somebody fondles it and picks it up and flips through it and says, yeah, this is the real deal.
Yep, exactly. So but we were pleased. It was a warm day. Both days were in the 90s, so that's a little warm. But the facility has a 42-foot high ceiling and a good air filtration and moving system. So even though it's not air conditioned, an ice arena, not air conditioned. I don't understand. But anyways, it was comfortable.
Good. Let me ask Lee here. Lee, don't mean to put you on the spot, but okay. Looks like I'm doing it anyways. Are you ready to go to a live fair? Are you ready to have a booth?
I think so. I think so. I don't see one in this area until we go to Florida in April. I don't think either Tennessee or Atlanta will take place this year, from what I've been hearing. But I think I'm going to be ready. You know, what you said is true. It's so much easier to sell something if somebody can pick it up and look at it and ask questions about it, and that you can suggest things that they may not have thought of. Are we losing Richard?
No, I'm here.
one thing I am curious about, did y'all take any kind of precautions? Were masks worn or extra cleaning or anything like that?
Well, New Hampshire is a bit ahead of the curve, I think, around the country. I think we're in New Hampshire is one of those few states that we have a 70% inoculation
I
rate.
think you were the
Matter of
first. I
fact,
think New Hampshire was first.
Yeah.
one of the first. Also, last night, our emergency governor's powers expired. He let them expire. He didn't renew them. So and we were just a week away from that, and the writing was already on the wall. The facility had a little bit of restrictions. We had to go in through a side door instead of the front door because of the food being served at the front entrance. But other than that, there were a few masks on the floor. People wanted to wear them, wore them. But a lot of people on the floor did not have masks.
Yeah. We are not quite at that level around here. Well, particularly not where I live. We're nowhere near that level. We're about 25% vaccinated in Gordon County, which is just terrible, just
that's
awful.
A low number.
But there has certainly been, among those of us who are vaccinated, the excitement of being able to get back together, even if it's in small groups. And I have missed the contact. The contact with the virtual shows has been good, and I've met people I would not otherwise have dealt with because I'm kind of regional, in where I go. But that person to person, you can't get the same thing.
Right.
You really can't.
Yeah, I'm at an outdoor market in Maine today, in Rundle, Maine. This is a daily market actually, and that goes on Saturday being the more active day. And there were only a handful of people here today wearing masks. Maine is loosening up, not quite as quick as New Hampshire did or as Vermont, but it's in New England. It's happening.
Yeah.
There's a general feeling of relief. I hear that from people. Although I will share a little anecdotal story where we're discovering that some people need to be re-socialized. They're not quite they're not quite ready for prime time yet. I went out with a friend last night, and I'm saying to myself, we gotta give him a little more time to get used to being in the public again.
Richard, Arundel, Maine. Do we have a book dealer up there? Arundel Books?
Yeah,
No?
I forget where they are. I think they're in Maine.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
there
one of
are
the
a
things
lot
we
of
were
dealers
talking
in
about on
Maine.
the show, one of the things we were talking about on the show a few weeks ago was with the ephemera dealers. Did you notice at the fair that the traditional book dealers were carrying any more or less ephemera as usual?
Well, myself, I carry more ephemera than I used to, but others, a lot of people had ephemera on the floor. We had Barbara Lowe from Florida come up for the
Sure,
show. We were
sure.
pleased to have her, and I think she's a regular guest here, isn't she? And
Oh, yes.
so we were, and she was very pleased, and she specifically said to me she was very glad that she came.
Good. Well, I don't know when the big shows are going to start back up again. I have to imagine 2022, the ABAA will be doing their East and West Coast shows, and the rest of us will be following.
Well, I will offer you some news. The ABAA Boston show has for this year in their November rendition is canceled. The ABAA New York show that normally takes place in March of this year has been moved to September. I think the second week or third week of September, second week of September maybe.
Is that right?
So and maybe it's the third week, but so the ABAA show is going to happen in New York City. I heard today that there's actually going to be a shadow show in New York as well. So that those are the only shows I know. I know Cooperstown in June has been canceled. Rochester, which is usually in September, sometime October, that's been canceled. So I mean, there aren't too many choices right now.
Yeah. Ooh, that inventory is going to have to keep building up for another 9 months.
Yeah. Well, I would say build it up for New Hampshire because we will be going with all flags flying next June.
So you're do outdoor shows as well. How do you feel? What kind of material do you bring outdoors, Richard, as opposed to an indoor show? Are you discriminate? Do you have a
Pretty
tent
much.
there?
No, I here I don't, but I do have tents sometimes. Matter of fact, tomorrow I'm going to set up at another outdoor show and I'll put a tent up mostly for the sun. Um, we watch the weather here closely, but forecasters are usually wrong. We were supposed to have rain last night and this morning, which never happened, and it dampened the lack of rain dampened the market today. We didn't have as many dealers and as many public as normal here on a Saturday, but
Hmm.
we got decent crowds and it was a beautiful, beautiful day. I mean, there isn't a cloud in the sky here.
Good, good. That's quite a yeoman's job to be hauling those things. What do you drive, Richard? To hauling all that material back and forth from the car every week.
You're actually looking at it here. If I can show you.
Oh, how clever! So you don't haul anything around.
Yeah, I can haul most anything. It's a Dodge Sprinter, and I do carry. Whoops, I do carry quite a bit of inventory actually. So it's but I carry. It's also I'm selling to discreet customers. They know what they're looking for. I'm not everybody's cup of tea at a flea market. But I will be at Brimfield in July. Is going to be back with all the fields open. You want to come to Brimfield, Massachusetts. The Tuesday after the 4th of July is when it opens, and it will go from Tuesday through Sunday. All the fields are going, and you're going to really find out what's happening. And I will tell you this:
I'm coming. I'm coming.
We had an antique show here in New Hampshire the weekend before my show, and they had 9,300 people turn up in the rain. It rained all 3 days of Memorial Day weekend, and they had 9,300 people show up for an indoor-outdoor show.
I'm coming, Richard. I'm coming back east on the 4th of July to meet my new grandson. And after the 5th, the 6th, I'll be heading on the road to do some scouting in New England. And I will be at the show. I will look you up there.
Well, I'm real easy to find. There's one antique center in the middle of town. It's called, guess what? Brimfield Antiques. And I'm on the porch. So if you can remember the name Brimfield, then know that I'm in an antique center and I'm on the porch. You'll find me.
I will find you. How about you, Lee? Any closing questions or comments for?
Well, I think like everybody else, I'm anxious to get back to being with people, and to and I don't know. I've had a good year. I won't say that I haven't. But for me, one thing it shows is the opportunity to buy, and I'd much rather be able to be there to buy than to be trying to decide online if it's something I really want, and this kind of thing. So I'm going to be ready.
Things I'm buying. Yeah, I'm telling you, the things I'm buying at the markets and with customers coming to me and stuff have been phenomenal this year. I've been truly excited. I just bought this week. I just bought the first edition of Moby Dick, of course, illustrated by Rockwell Kent.
Oh wow!
And that was at the book show, by the way.
All right.
We have a lot to look forward to.
One of our listeners has just advised Florida. Yeah, Florida will be live next April.
Look me up. Call me before you come to Brimfield.
All right, I'm going to make you buy me a hot dog.
Okay, I will do that. Actually, I'll buy you kettle corn. How's that?
Even better. Even better. All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much. It's always nice to be here with you guys.
Maybe we'll have you back in a few weeks to tell us how Brimfield went. You'll be a roving reporter on the streets.
Brimfield. On the streets. That's where I am most of the time, is on the streets.
Do you have an accordion or a monkey or anything like that?
No, but I play guitar. We can, I can do a little busking if I really need to.
All right, everybody. Richard Mori, busker at heart, live with a report from the Northern New England Book Fair, and I think we're going to have him back to hear about Brimfield. Always a pleasure, Richard.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Ed.
Bye-bye.
All right, for the last couple of weeks, we've had our co-host here, Lee Lynn, talking to us about her book club. And we've all been to book clubs. It is so much fun to hang around. I know that some of them existed online and Zoom book clubs over the last year, but people are starting to have fun. They're starting to get back together. They're starting to take out second mortgages to redecorate their house so the book club can come over and wows it. And here's our local wowzer, Lee Lynn. Tell us what's going on with your book club, Lee.
I promise I did not take out a second mortgage.
Oh, okay.
My redecorating has been of the budget variety, I can guarantee. But anyway, what is now the Fourth Sunday Book Club in Calhoun, Georgia, started around 2002 in the pastor's study at Calhoun First Methodist Church. Bob and I were not really going to it at that point. But in about, I guess it was 2004, the next book to be read was announced as Salvation on Sand Mountain by Dennis Covington, and a book which began as coverage of the attempted murder trial of Glenn Summerford of Scottsboro, Alabama. But it turned into a personal journey for the author. Summerford allegedly tried to kill his wife by forcing her hand into a box of rattlesnakes at gunpoint. Why did he do this? He was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ with signs following, and one of those signs being taking up serpents.
Sure. And
he thought his wife should be taking up those serpents as well. So Covington started following the trial. And because
excuse me, Lee, that comes from one of the epistles of Paul,
right,
somewhere
this is from the 16th chapter of Mark, verses 16 and 18. Yeah.
I think it's only one sentence long.
It's fairly long. It covers serpents, it covers poison, it covers speaking in tongues, it covers healing. But they see it as extremely significant. And snake handling has been fairly big in this area, with two major churches from the 70s through early 2000s, one in Cartersville, Wade's Chapel, and one in Kingston, whose pastor, Carl Porter, was extremely well known in the snake handling world. We went because Bob's students at Calhoun High School did a school magazine called Southwind, and they had done a series on religions in the area and had visited snake handling churches. And I've got, assuming this works, this is a picture of the church at Wade's Chapel taken by one of the students. And here's another picture from Wade's Chapel. Now, Wade's Chapel was well known because of the death of one of their members, Mr. Barrett, by snake bite, and who refused treatment, who said he knew he was going to die from a snake bite, but he was ready for it. And anyway, he did. And this is the book. Dennis says
your photos aren't coming up, Lee.
They're not?
No.
Oh, shoot.
But you're telling a good story. Please continue.
Okay. Well, let me see. I tell you what.
Did you ever meet any of these people?
Well, I didn't go. I didn't go to the snake handling ones. I'll just show you the book. How about that? This is Salvation on Sand Mountain, and which is an excellent book, and I highly recommend it. Covington has written other things too, as has his wife, Vicki Covington. But this is a really personal view of the whole snake handling phenomenon, and how he gets involved in it beyond just covering that trial. So because Bob had videos and pictures of actual snake handling, he was urged to come to book club, and that was our start of involvement with the book club, which never ended. So we're talking about 18 years of involvement. The article for the Southwind magazine, the lead writer for it was a student who is now the Gordon County Tax Commissioner. And he has said to me on a number of occasions, one of the high points of my high school career was going to watch the snake handlers. And he wrote an excellent article about it. So, like we said, that's Mark 16, verses 17 through 18. You prove your faith by being willing to take up serpents, to drink poison. Strychnine is the poison of choice around here. Handling fire, eating fire in some cases, speaking in tongues, healing the sick. Now, we don't do that in the Methodist Church, but there is a fascination with what goes on in these services. And another book that I recommend about snake handling is The Serpent Handlers. This is about 3 families, one in Tennessee, the Browns, one in Kentucky, the Coots, and Mary Kay, this is for you, one in West Virginia, the Elkins. All very, very well known, and some of them I think are still practicing. What all of the observers, from the authors of these books to the students who went to observe, found that the members were passionate about their beliefs, that they were willing to die for them, and certainly some have. One very famous member of the Brown family, Pumpkin Brown, was a victim of a snake bite. They'd all been bitten a number of times and survived because, as they said, their faith allowed them to overcome the snake bite. They were friendly and welcoming to visitors, and had a lot of visitors back particularly in the 80s and 90s. A lot of film crews from PBS and from university. We may have a snake handler on our hands.
Elkin. I think Elkin may be Mary Kay's maiden name. I'm not sure. We'll have to check.
No, she said Brown is.
Oh, Brown. Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Close
Mary
enough.
Kay.
Yeah. They were welcoming to visitors. They were very careful with the snakes. They were kept in boxes. I think they were lulled a little by the frantic music and dancing and shouting and screaming that went on at these services. Members had to be in the spirit before they were allowed to take up a snake. And the pastor would tell someone, no, you can't do it. You're not ready for this. The visitors tend to either get caught up in the emotions of the service or to be absolutely terrified that one of those snakes might be thrown their way. In 2001, keeping up with what I suppose you'd call a family tradition, my son Gardner, who was a senior in journalism and English at the University of Georgia, went to Carl Porter's church in Kingston, Georgia, and he did a photo and essay. I don't know how well you can see this, on the church, and he went, I think, 4 times, and wrote a really very good in-depth article about Reverend Porter's church. And in Salvation on Sand Mountain, the last chapter describes a wedding at Porter's church in the early 90s, where the couple were both, one was marrying into a snake handling family against the protest of his Catholic mother. And then, while the wedding did not include snake handling, an evening service after the wedding, which most everybody came back for, also included snake handling. When Gardner went to Porter's church, his dad had some advice from him. Sit in the back and don't handle snakes. Well, he didn't handle snakes, but Reverend Porter, because he went early to interview him, insisted that he sit right up front. And so he did. He said he sort of used the camera as a shield between him and the snakes. But he got some great pictures of the snake handling. And I know that when Bob took students to snake handling churches, he was always very careful. They had parent permission. They stayed out of the reach of the snakes. They took a lot of pictures, but they tried to, kind of stay in the background. But he always told them about Wendy Bagwell. Now, Wendy Bagwell was a gospel singer and a comedian, kind of a Southern redneck type, I suppose you'd say. And he had a group called Sunlighters. They sang in churches all over the place, and he made a lot of records. And one of his records features a sketch that's called Here Come the Rattlesnakes, where Bagwell and his group were invited to sing at a church, not knowing, he said, that there would be snakes. And when the snakes came out, Geraldine, one of his singers, and her name was Geraldine, says, "What in the world are we going to do?" And Wendy said, "Just take it easy and don't panic. Just look around and find out where the back door is." Geraldine, "I already did, and there ain't one." Wendy, "Well, where do you reckon they want one?" So that's snake handling at the book club. And next week, we're going to talk about how we choose.
If it wasn't true, it would be science fiction.
Oh, I know, but it very much is. And I have pictures to prove it. Next week, we're going to talk about how we choose books, which is not very scientific. It's a kind of a, fly by the seat of your pants procedure. But
how democratic is it?
It depends. Sometimes when Bob was in charge, it was not very democratic. It is now more democratic than it used to be. But people have a chance to promote things that they want to read. And if we say, no, you're not going to read that, then we don't. So,
well, I'm hoping it'll be a good model for others to follow.
So, and I'm going to bring and show you the list of the books that have been read by this book club since 2002.
And maybe we'll put them on our list.
Long, which is long.
All right. Also with us next week is Mary Kay's coming back with part 2. She took the class with Carrie Schroeder, the book artist, and she's going to be talking about optical and philosophical paper toys. Do you have any idea what that is? Optical and philosophical paper toys.
No, but I want to respond to one of Mary Kay's comments about the town in Virginia, West Virginia named Elkins, which I know, but a town in West Virginia that had been a center for snake handling was Jolo, Jolo. I think it's a very small town, but that was a location that there was a lot of activity.
What kind of snakes are these?
Rattlesnakes, mostly.
Rattlesnakes,
timber rattlers, copperheads.
Copperheads
around here, which are easy to come by. Some churches have used cottonmouths, cottonmouth moccasins. I've read comments about using even coral snakes, which are extremely deadly, in this, but we have coral snakes in this area. But rattlesnakes, I think partly because they're big, and impressive looking, more so than the smaller ones. Rattlesnakes are kind of the snake of choice.
Crazy. Not some place you're going to see Indiana Jones at a rattlesnake convention. All right. And of course, next week, we're going to have our contributors from Lynn Thompson, David Hess, and others. Looking forward to seeing everybody next week. So that's it, folks. Another issue of the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. See you next week, Lee.
Bye-bye. See you then.
Bye-bye.